we're all I'm Matt. Obviously,
Hello, I'm John. Yes, nice to meet you, Flint.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing,
Yeah,
Johnny
nice
Clay?
to meet you. Honor, pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Oh, I'm having fun. It's a Sunday in COVID when not much else is going on. So here we are.
Right. So it's actually John.
What?
Sorry, John was the one who sort of spearheaded this. He was the one. You guys should read this book, and and all that stuff.
I went. Oh, I don't have a webcam. You guys said no, don't bother.
Well, I mean, whatever. It's just
Well, just trust me. I'm a very handsome man.
I
went on a big Flint Dille interview binge about a year ago, and then I found out that you had a book coming out, and I was like, I had to share with the guys because I enjoyed listening to your story so much that.
Oh, did you do the audiobook version of it?
I did, and that was a lot of fun. It was there's a specific way that you speak that in interviews that was sort of funny to hear how it was translated through another person.
Okay, you're the only other person in the world that thought that. I totally agree because I haven't actually read it since it came out, but I just listened to the audiobook, and it was really bizarre to hear somebody else doing my thoughts and my story, but it wasn't my voice. And but the fact is, I also realized why I'm not a voice actor. I mean, he really, he really found nuances and things in there that I didn't even know were there. Yeah. Maybe they weren't there, and he just found them. So an alternate universe is a version where I read it, but it would not be nearly as professional.
I have to say, I'm on my third listen. It was kind of, you were talking about the quarantine, but when John suggested the book, I was like, yeah, this sounds like right up my alley. And I listened to it, and I was just very inspired. And then I listened to it again, and then you were talking today, and I was like, you know what? I don't need to watch another episode of Designated Survivor. Why don't I pop in that audio book? And I was like, really, it's just it was just a great, fun book, nice, and it was exactly what I needed right now.
Well, I know. So it's really funny. That's kind of the funny note that I think it hits is it was always supposed to be about a golden age. It was just, it was like, it started out where I was working for a company called Niantic, and I was sitting in an apartment in Paris, where our new game was coming out on that weekend. It's like, this thing bombs, we're dead. And, and what should I do? Oh, I'll start writing a book because I had 150 pages of interviews, text interviews. And so I just dragged them into a Google Docs folder, and I started, no, this won't be so hard. And then I basically wrote the book on Facebook. I just put a chapter, see what people said. They'd ask more questions. I'd answer that question. And then there was a serious editorial project, thing after that. But I realized I basically had written a draft of it before I realized, this is really about just a golden age and what a great time could be. And it's something that almost can't exist now, but I want it to. How do you bring that back? I mean, it was just, everything was so damn exciting and fun. And it's not just because I was young, because I was young, before the book began. It was not exciting and fun. After the book was over, actually the period after that was kind of just as exciting. It was just a lot different.
One thing I thought was, the only problem I had with the audiobook was he pronounces it Dr. Arkville. That was why.
There were some pronunciation problems with friends of mine, and they tried. It wasn't their fault. They sent me a bunch of things. How do you pronounce this name? And I'd send them a phonetic pronunciation. But you missed one every. Yeah, I know there were things you just blew past, but. Yeah,
it's okay.
I mean, look, if it were the perfect book, there'd be no reason to ever write another one. So I guess it's
is that? Are you going to write another one? That would.
I might write one about. I was talking to a friend about the period right after that, which is when I really went into video games and stuff like. Well, I was writing movies for Steven, which is what where that book ended, and the next period was simultaneously my Hollywood screenwriter period and my introduction to real video games. So that was a pretty cool period.
I mean, it definitely was. That's okay. So we should we do the official? We're going to do the official start of recording, and then you can tell all these stories again. We'll act like we haven't heard them. We're like,
or just splice this part in.
I had just recorded that, so you could just move on to the introductions, and then we'll just keep it all together.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, we're just going to throw it out there. But really quick, so you said you have auctions you want to...
Oh, yeah, and I've been doing that. Well, you're on my Facebook page, right?
Yeah.
What I was doing was, just oddly enough, it was right after I got done doing the book. Basically, I have this very large storage area in my office. And so for the last 35 years, because I lived in the same place for 35 years, right? I bought it while I was doing it. It's in the book. But I sort of added on to it. But I had this huge storage area. So I never had to sort through anything it's not really like I'm a hoarder. It's just I'm lazy. And, I finish a project or I'd be able to think, oh, it's time to clean off my desk, throw everything in a box into the storage. And then finally that day came when the storage was full. And my wife and I agreed, okay, we're going to clean out the storage. And we estimate there are 140 boxes in there. Now, probably 15 of them are like Christmas, tree lights, stuff like that. But, there were about 120 boxes that were just my stuff. Just from my life, my mother, before she died, decided, well, I got to clean out my place, and just sent me everything down to my grade school transcript record. There were spelling test in second grade in there. I mean, she just so this is genetic that I.
Yeah.
So anyway, and it was right after. I mean, the book came out in July. I finished writing the book right as COVID was beginning, right as the last meeting I had with anybody before lockdown was my editor came over. So the first couple of weeks of that, and then I started doing promotion stuff for the book before it came out, and then it came out in July, and then in August, my wife and I put a day on the calendar when we were going to clean out storage. This is a very long way of getting to the end.
Love it.
That day came. And my son was going out of town, so we figured, well, we'll get it done in a week. So we start moving out boxes, and pretty quickly I realized this is not a week. It's like you have a scrapbook box. Every single object in there was something at one time I thought I ought to keep. So that means every time you're looking at an object, and there were thousands of them, I have to decide keep, throw. And right before I did it, I read that book about the joy of tidying up.
Oh, the Marie Kondo. Yeah.
Okay. You guys
do that with our comics all the time.
I knew nothing about that. Okay. I knew nothing about the book or anything. It just happened to fall into my life at the exact moment I was starting this project. And I read it, and the thing is, if you hold this and it doesn't give you joy, get rid of it. And I found out how much stuff doesn't give me joy, gives me joy. But anyway, in the course of all this, I unearthed all the boxes from the Gamesmaster era. Because when I wrote the book from pretty much pure memory. I thought that I did not have journals from that period, because I kept a journal ever since I was 17, right? Pretty much every day.
I was going to ask you about that, because you mentioned it in another interview I saw. Have you been journaling since then, like every day? That's a great source for a book,
Yeah, I did from when I was 17 in some freshman English class. They said I just start doing a journal, and I just kept it up ever since.
Wow. So you passed that class then. You've really taken that class, and
I took that. That was a shockingly important class. You never know what's going to change your life. I can't forget what class it was. I can't forget who the teacher was. I can't remember any of that. But I can remember that I kept a journal ever since. I'd have to go back to the first one and see it. But anyway, so I wrote the book just from memory, because what I thought was that basically that period of the 80s is what's known as the digital dark age. When I was at Google later, they'd refer to the 80s because everybody had a different kind of computer. You're working on K Pro or Timex Sinclair. I was working on Deckmates, and I had the first Apple Mac. I mean, hey, you got $3,000. This Mac kind of fell off a truck, if you know what I mean. You couldn't buy. A friend of mine gave me one. They sold me one that fell off a truck, and it worked perfectly well and all that. So, and then remember, there's no internet, so it's not like You just install your software and you're going, right? And but the Mac was not really functional as a writing tool, but it really looked cool. So I wrote some journal stuff on that, most of it on my Deckmate, which to this day I have the most affectionate attitude towards as a screenwriting thing. The programs are infinitely more sophisticated now, but that thing, that's why I did all the Transformers, all the G.I. Joe, everything in the Gamesmaster was written on a Deckmate, and I have a strong affection. Wow. But now, what I thought was, I'd have to get these discs translated, and it's basically these are steam powered computers anyway. No, I mean, yeah, it's a long time ago, and so I thought I just lost my journals from that period. So I just wrote the book from memory, and it was shockingly easy. I mean, when you start remembering something and writing about it, all of a sudden you remember one thing or one person, and 10 more memories fall out of it, and then they all begin to weave together. And that period weaves together really well because it was a very coherent period in some ways, and very linear period. I mean, given that the book is totally chronological, but it doesn't feel like it because it bounces back and forth. But that was accurate. I'd be writing Transformers in the day and doing some D&D thing in the afternoon, and doing whatever else in the night. But anyway, so and then what, most of the people involved are still alive, and so I'd send them copies of it, or they'd be on my Facebook page, and I'd be saying things like, hey, do you remember it this way? And and so like Luke Gygax is there, and he was certainly there for all the D&D Mansion stuff, and Ernie remembered some of it, and Penny Yukovich remembered some of it, and so that got pretty right. And then Buzz was around for we were talking about the Sunbow stuff and Ruby Spears and all that, and so I mean, a bunch of people helped me with it, but they pretty much were Linda Wolverton knew a lot of the later stuff, and Frank Miller remembered some stuff, and so I knew it was pretty accurate. But I didn't know how accurate until I actually found my journals from that period. It turned out I printed them out, and they were sitting right in the box where they were supposed to be. Of course, I could not have found the box. That was after I wrote the book. And I reread it, and every single thing was shockingly accurate. I mean, as far as the order of things happen. I mean, what you write about in your journal has almost nothing to do with what a fan would find interesting 30 years later, 35 years later. Okay, it's like, I'm getting flushed by some woman, that no fan cares about that, right? That was of great interest to me. The incidents that were actually written down, there was only one that was inaccurate. And that was, and I can't remember the chapters even still in the book, because I remember my agent wanted to shake it out. That's the other thing, is you forget what's in a book and what's not, because you make all these decisions at the last minute for what to leave in and what to leave out. You don't, when I'm listening to the audiobook, I don't remember what's not there, and that was a night at the Magic Castle with Charlie Lippincott and Joey Thompson, and I had thought Gary Gygax was there, but I couldn't remember what he did. I just remember him kind of sitting there, and the truth is, when I reread my journal, there was no mention of his being there. So, I mean, everybody else that was there is somebody who you would expect Gary to have been there, but he was probably just out of town or somewhere else. So so I had a wrong memory of Gary having been there. And then the thing I'd forgotten about until I read Gary's blog after he died was the meeting we had with Orson Welles. I don't know how you forget a meeting with Orson Welles, but I had, which was also at the Magic Castle, and and then and I mean, but even now I know what we met about, but I don't actually remember the meeting, but I remember working with him on Transformers extremely well.
Yeah, well, that's described very, very vividly in the book. Just him sort of in the wheelchair and everything, and it's a little. I mean, I guess you knew because he died like a month or
a week,
couple months, a week after recording. I mean, that's
really must have pushed him.
Yeah, we pushed him hard. No, what's funny is if you watch, there are two films. One's called The Other Side of the Wind, and the other one it's a documentary about making The Other Side of the Wind. It was Orson Welles' last movie, but it was finished by Peter Bogdanovich last year. There's a documentary. They'll love me when I'm dead, or I love me when I'm gone, or something like that. I think it's the name of the documentary. And Peter Bogdanovich was talking about how the last conversation he ever had, I think it was Bogdanovich, last conversation he ever had with Orson Welles is Orson Welles says, "You know what I did today? I played a toy." And that was a week before he died.
Wow. I mean,
it wasn't really much of a surprise. I mean, I can't remember whether I put it in the book, but I remember saying to Hildy, "Well, I'm glad we got him this week." Because he just, he was kind of wheezy, and he was in a wheelchair, and then he's in a walker, and then he's able to walk a few steps. But while we were adjusting all the microphones and everything, I was talking to him about the Mercury Theater, because I've been listening to cassettes of the Mercury Theater stuff, which is really incredible. And I think he thought it was kind of cool. And I now can relate to this better. That some kid that was like, 27 years old or whatever I was probably 30 at that point, knew about that stuff.
Well, there are all kinds of rumors that like he didn't get to finish it or whatever, but I guess that's not true.
No,
he totally finished it. But
maybe there was some pickup line they wanted, for Unicron 3 months later, and they had somebody do it. I mean, I couldn't testify that wasn't true,
sure.
But he got all the way through his session, and in his session he did everything we had written for him.
Wow.
It's not like there was a ton of dialogue written for him that you couldn't get that done in a day. Yeah. I would imagine.
No, it was a very, I think it was a half-day session.
And as you described, there's very little in animation that is not like throwaway scenes or different angles or different. Right. It's animation. So
you go watch Orson Welles' final film. It is the exact opposite form of production. He went out. It's Other Side of the Wind, which is simultaneously one of the most amazing and worst things I've ever seen in my life. But just for film life and for just understanding how the world works, that film is important at so many different levels. It's well worth the time to watch it.
Well, yeah, you are a film guy. I know I was a film major as well, so I mean I was obviously there was a lot of, I saw some parallels. Obviously I'm not quite as successful as you, but
you're not quite as old as I am. There's still time.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, maybe can we go back a little bit to the?
Yeah, we didn't even finish packing your stuff away, going through your stuff yet.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm kind of done.
I'm sorry.
No. That's what I've always enjoyed about your interviews is the way they kind of go off on tangents, but eventually, like 3 hours later, you come back to the point. But I just kind of wanted to steer you back.
There's a reason I do nonlinear alternate reality games. No, anyway. So what the packing? So anyway. Long story, we also discovered that the floor had rotted out in the storage area, and we were going to lose half our storage area when we rebuild it. It was just really shabby. So I had to throw out half my stuff. That was basically it. I mean, we got a storage unit off site, but I wasn't going to get 2 storage units, and it became this journey to the underworld. I mean, if we're doing Joseph Campbell journey here, this was my trip to the underworld, because literally you're seeing ghosts of your whole life. I'm looking at, birthday cards from dead people and you're like, it's literally like your life passing before your eyes in a random slow motion manner. And so I'm throwing all this stuff out, but what I'm finding that is of interest to, and I at this point, I'm just like, this is a pretty good approximation of helps, but I'm taking pictures of everything that I think, people on my Facebook page would find interesting. And I was kind of fascinated by what they found interesting. You'd like, I posted a press kit for the Transformers, the movie, that I found that, and like people, there were like 350 likes, and it's like, really? For a press kit? I mean, this was something that I'd found in a box. I mean, obviously what had happened is my assistant Hildy, she ran the office. She was not my assistant at that point. Later, she was my assistant. But, she probably walked by the office, flicked it over her shoulder, skids across my desk, falls on the floor, sits there for, 6 months. Then when I'm cleaning out the office, I throw it in the box, sits in the box, cut to 2020, and I open the box and say, "Oh, here's a press kit for Transformers the movie." I mean, I would have had no reason to read it. I mean, why? I mean, it wasn't like I was unaware of what the script was. I was not unaware of the movie, but they were, let's say, distributed. But I feel like fans are going crazy over that. And and then I'd also, when I left the office, I'd looted the the posters we actually had hanging in the office at the time, which have a certain kind of provenance value, and then various and sundry toys. I mean, the single most, to me, valuable object, and here's the brutal lesson, is that what's valuable to fans is not necessarily what's valuable to you. And me, the most valuable object. Hold on, I think I can find him.
All right.
I'm touching him. I just have to pull him out of this awkward place in the drawer. I'll probably further break him. This is the Megatron I had on my desk when I was writing the movie. Whoa. And he's not put together. It's falling apart. He's lost his barrel. It's old Walther PPK Megatron.
Yeah, okay. They don't make Megatron as a gun anymore, right? Because
no, he's not a gun anymore. But he was James Bond's gun in 1985. Oh, yeah. And I mean, when I found that, it like just brought back, just touching this thing even now brings back the experience of writing that movie. Because I'd be sitting there, write myself in the corner, try to do Megatron, get frustrated. I mean, it's broken for a reason. And I mean, like, that is the kind of thing, that is worth nothing to any fan. That to me is like stuff that's really valuable. Whereas the stuff fans love is stuff that, it's like, press kit. Okay. You know what I mean? And it's a totally different thing. I mean, that's what's kind of interesting about it.
Well, the fan experience and the creator experience are completely different. It's understandable why you have a connection to that, and the fans would be like, "Oh my God, this press kit reminds me of my childhood."
Absolutely, and the artwork on one of the Transformers kits and one of the G.I. Joe things I have is just pristine, and it brings you back. I mean, that even with me brought me back to, wow, this is what it felt like when I started on G.I. Joe. Mm-hmm. This is it. This is what it looked like. This, and that was obviously something probably Steve Gerber gave me when I started working on the project. It's like, all right, you got to know about G.I. Joe. Here you are. I mean, G.I. Joe to me was just effortless. I mean, that was the easiest project I ever worked on in my life, whereas Transformers was always hard. I don't think my work on one was better than on the other, but I mean, they were just at the opposite end of hard.
There was a very quirky style to the episodes that you wrote. My wife and I watched the Gamesmaster episode a few weeks back, and we're like, this is such a strange episode, but we were having such a good time throughout it, the whole thing, and laughing at it. Like, after listening to the audiobook, I got more of a sense of what you guys were doing in terms of like your humor and the little jokes that you were putting in there that maybe kids weren't getting, but adults would catch. And that has been the most fun that I've had in revisiting a bunch of the old episodes of Joe and Transformers.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the title, The Gamesmaster, for the book came from, I crowdsourced on my Facebook page, and that got the most votes. So I went with that. I mean, I got my agent for the book on the Facebook page. I got my publisher on my Facebook page.
Oh, that's so cool.
I was crowdsourcing the editing of the book. I mean, I was just doing a kind of new media experiment while I was doing it, which it taught me a lot. But so the final thing on the closet. So then all of a sudden I have this stuff hanging around, and what you have to understand is I have a wife who has zero geek in her whatsoever, not a zero, and I'm getting my Unicron, my $600 Unicrons coming in, and it will be that's the one thing. There is no, in the office now, we've totally redone the room but there is not one piece of geek memorabilia. I don't think there's anything from this stuff.
I just that Megatron in the drawer there. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know there's hidden geek memorabilia.
Hidden geek memorabilia. That'll be next.
Covert geek memorabilia. Nice. But I mean, well, we just sort of went with the theme of like old family stuff. Like I got a picture of my father shaking hands with Richard Nixon. That stuff. I mean, who has that? And like, you got these secret society posters up here. That's actually from my grandfather's fraternity. I mean, just like weird. It was like weird family stuff is what ended up on the wall.
There'll be a Unicron back there somewhere.
Oh, there will be a Unicron on a table over here. I imagine Unicron will have a 4-week life expectancy to live on the table, which
enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, Unicron will be in some warehouse in El Segundo, and that'll be it for Unicron. But And so anyway, in the course of this, I just decided, and because that's the other thing you hit. I mean, you hit a certain age where you realize, okay, this is never going, no G.I. Joe posters. I always thought someday I'll have an office. I remember Ray Bradbury's office. He had like every cool thing you could possibly imagine in it. He had some in his house too.
Wow.
But and I always thought I'll have an office like that. Well, that's not going to happen this lifetime. So and even if it did, the stuff I'm not going to sell would fill my imaginary geek office. But I just said I'm just going to sell it. I mean, I gave a lot of it away to people that just deserve it. I gave Joe Trautman the Transformers the movie poster just because he's Joe Trautman, he deserved it. And then some of it I'm going to sell it just to finance. That was the deal I made with my wife. We thought this was all garbage. And so my secret thrill of doing the auctions is proving to her every day, oh, yeah, we just got another $5,000. Guess it's not garbage. Huh?
Wow. Yeah.
It's a one and only time I ever won an argument.
It's amazing about you is just like throwaway lines where you're like, oh, Ray Bradbury's office. Like we could do an hour and a half interview just talking about the fact that you were over at Ray Bradbury's office, or that you went to the publisher of Famous Monsters. Did your father hire him? Was that the story?
No. Well,
Forrest Ackerman.
Both those cases, my first contact with them was through my dad. Dad and Ray Bradbury were friends. Ray Bradbury he was the ultimate Buck Rogers fan. Okay. And my grandfather created Buck Rogers. And so, my dad had him write the introduction for his book, Recollected Works of Buck Rogers. They did in 1969. And they just got to be friends. And the next thing I know, Ray Bradbury's giving me writing advice, because, somewhere at the end of high school, I decided I wanted to be a writer. And it's like, wow, because he was my hero.
That's a good guy to be giving you writing advice.
Well, during COVID, I reread, sorry, ignore that phone. That's this annoying phone we have that only gets people trying to sell us life insurance or our front door gate. It's Amazon front door. It's, anyway. But I can't not answer. That's just one of the old vestigial things that hangs around in your life, for no reason. But anyway, so with Bradbury, he was incredibly, helpful and all that. And I went over to his office one time. It was a perfect office. It was up at the top of a building, I think at the corner of Beverly and I want to say Wilshire in Santa Monica. I could be wrong about Beverly. But it could be Rodeo, one of those two streets in Beverly Hills. And it's a white building. It's got a gold top. It's an Art Deco building. I mean, it looks like simultaneously, it looks like a futuristic building from Buck Rogers is what it figure was built in the 20s. Okay. Yeah, but it's great. It was great. And he was in exactly the right office and he had all the stuff around. You just kind of standing around and go, wow. No, Bradbury, but during COVID, I reread Illustrated Man. And I realized that there's one book where every story is absolutely hard-coded in my brain. That's it. I mean, I didn't realize I was as familiar with it as I was, but I remembered everything. And I remember it was like listening to a Beatle album or something, what song comes next, it was like that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you definitely have a legacy here there as well. I mean, like your family and friends and everybody, you have a lot. One thing, we're all comic book guys too. So we hear, you hear Frank Miller and you hear Mauve Wolfman.
Yeah, Mauve, yeah.
Mauve,
Mauve. I mean, what a fabulous guy he is. I did a show when the book came out. I was just did a limited series of Gamesmaster shows. I had Marv on there. Okay, Marv, that guy falls off the tree totally unique. I mean, he's 2 years old when he's an editor at either Marvel or DC. I can't remember which. I said what it was, and then Mark corrected me. Remember, he corrected it in the manuscript. It's correct in the manuscript.
Oh.
He shows up in my life, with this flood of, it's in the book, but this flood of comic book guys that mostly were Steve Gerber opening the floodgates, right? But Marty Pasco was around a lot, and he was another New York comic guy, and Roger Slifer was, so all of a sudden, there's a scene in there. It's Mauve's unfortunately named Porno House, but it was. If you'd gone to this place, it looked like a set from Boogie Nights. I mean, bad stuff was happening there in '67 in the Summer of Love and
that was so funny because I did a panel with him like a couple of years ago, and then I stumbled across that part of the part of the book, and I was like, "Whoa, holy crap!"
Well, bear in mind, Marv was involved in none of this. It was just our impression walking around it, but it was pretty. I mean, everybody was there with the party was like there looking around. I remember because that was when I first knew Frank. I mean, we were friends at that point, but I didn't know him obviously not nearly as well as I know him later. And we showed up, and Lynn was there, and Lynn at that point had blonde hair because she just decided had brown hair because she decided you were treated like stupid if you were blonde. And she's a colorist, so she knows that stuff. Yeah, exactly. So she was there. Linda Wolverton was there. I remember we were all looking around the thing. You're realizing this just looks like a set from Boogie Nights. And it was the first time I met Howard Chaykin there. And that was the first. That wasn't the official Wolf Manor, which would be his second place. But that was the first place. I can't remember whether I met Marv there. I think I had met Marv before that because Len and Marv came out together, and and then Marv basically replaced me as story editor on Transformers when I went to Inhumanoids and Visionaries. I mean, I'm still a producer on Transformers, so I was around for the whole third season. But he then, was in there. We were jamming ideas for how to bring Optimus back because everybody was mad at us. Like, that was our idea, and. Yeah.
You mentioned Inhumanoids and Visionaries. I wouldn't mind talking about them for a quick second because I was a huge fan.
Matt and myself were just way into Visionaries when we were younger.
Yeah.
Well, Visionaries it loomed up large in my mind when I was cleaning out my storage because now I was seeing all that stuff again. It's a very difficult series to see. Okay, because there's not an English version of it. I mean, I may have some VHS tapes of it. I don't know.
I found a few episodes on Daily Motion, I think, and that's
I mean, somebody ought to just do Jolly Roger them because I don't even know who owns it. And at that point, I mean, that I would argue certainly was the most beautiful series we ever did. It was the best animated, and that was TMS, and they were, they were those guys were amazing. And I think it was sort of all of us at the peak of our powers, knowing that the era was over. I mean, by the time when I started writing it, we were still rolling. And when I got done, I was working for Steven. I mean, I remember him sending off the script. I'm heading over to Hamlet. So it was like the transitional series for me. And I love Visionaries. I mean, that Inhumanoids and Visionaries are the two properties I still have unfinished business with. I mean, with Transformers, Chris Metzen and I did a trilogy in the, just a few years ago, like in the 2010s. I think it was 2015. We started in 2011 because he and I were working. He was creative lead at a company called Blizzard, and they do World of Warcraft and StarCraft and Diablo. And we were working on a game called Diablo. And one day he turns around and he said, "Hey, you want to write a Transformer graphic novel, with me?" It was going to be 22-page graphic novel, right? And it's like, all right, I'm in. I haven't written Transformers since I wrote the script for the first game. And then an aborted game Treyarch was trying to do, or one of the Activision companies was trying to do, somewhere in like the late 90s, I would guess. But anyway, so I said, yeah. And that's when I learned the real lesson. And the lesson I learned was I may have written all this stuff back in the 80s and all that. And, but that was at that point, 20 years earlier, or 25 years earlier. And also at a certain point, you don't own it. You may have written it, but you don't own it anymore. And the fans own it.
Right.
Characters, if I'd have some, character, and I'd get the piece of plastic in the mail, and okay, he's gonna be Dipstick. All right, yeah. So then I'd have a bio for Dipstick, and I'd write up stuff for Crankshaft or whoever our character was, and I would think that I created and owned that character. That is not the case. The fact is, the fans own it after a little while, and they don't want to hear your opinion of what Dipship and
all right, they have their own opinions.
They have their own opinion. Their opinion is more valid than mine, and I realized that both Chris and Libya knew Transformers far better than I did at that point. And we're doing those books, and it took me a while to catch up. It took me a while to figure out that 25 years is a long time, and B, the world changes and see to catch up to where I could work with them, effectively and be useful to them.
Do you think if the internet had been around when you were writing back in the 80s, these shows, that would have affected your writing? Like, would you have been reading forums or whatever and seeing? Because I work as a colorist and letterer, and I do a lot of work in manga translations where we take the Japanese version and make it look as though it was always published in English. And it took me a couple of years before I started going online and reading what people had to say about it. And I was like, ooh, that was a mistake. I'm never doing that again.
Well, that's a great question, because I mean, we operate in a vacuum. But the thing you have to remember when we're doing the Sunbow stuff, and that is, we did 65 episodes of Transformers one year and 65 episodes of G.I. Joe. So that's 130 episodes, and that's not talking about Muscle Machines and Humanoids, Visionaries, which we were developing at that point. We had no time for anything. We didn't have time to pay attention to the comic books. We had time to get notes. We had time to go to recording sessions. We had time to go over storyboards. We had time to write. We had time to do that. And then whatever free time I had, I was going up to Dungeons & Dragons, learning how to design games and hanging out with those guys, because that was a really great, outrageous place. And so I don't think I would have had time for the internet. The one experience we had like that, which was a dress rehearsal for all the darker sides of social media, was Steve Gerber's bulletin board. And it was for no reason other than for us to upload scripts, and with our wicked fast. I think I had a 712 baud modem at that point. Like 15 minutes to upload a 60-page script. Now it just goes flying out as PDF, and you don't even see it go. Then it was like, and while you're waiting for it to upload, you go into the I guess the chat room but it wasn't exactly a chat room. It would be more like email, but it was very public, so it functioned more like Facebook. And man, that got ugly. I mean, we saw what was going to happen with social media back in the mid '80s, and we should have known.
I wish you had said something back then. Yeah, right.
I wish we known, but it was all people. I think it's in the book. Candy Montero.
It is. It's very interesting.
Candy said, "You guys got to stop doing that stuff. That stuff's poison," and she was right.
Yeah. There's a whole book there, I think. There's like a whole book.
Oh, yeah, it was, little I know, I'd like end up, about 20 years later working at Google and know more about that stuff I never want to know. But, that was a pretty good dress rehearsal for it. Sorry, this nonlinear conversation got me.
No, it's great.
I figured this was pretty much the way it was going to go.
Yeah.
It's I'm not the person you talk to for a point by point coherent.
Yeah, I was watching some of your con to couch videos, and I noticed that's definitely the way you guys sort of not unstructured conversations, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you watch some of those, the best stuff comes out when you're so far off the beaten track, and it's not everybody telling the same story that it's like grew cobwebs, 20 years ago. It's just some blown bag, and they start telling something that I hadn't thought about since then. Yeah, that's how it wasn't Con to Couch, but it was just a random conversation. This photograph I found, and then I asked Paul Davids, who was also on one of those, because he was the guy that set us up to go over. There's the other person you were asking about, Forey Ackerman, Paul David set up for us to go over and see Forey Ackerman. In the Acker Mansion. Okay, Marv's house was like, set from Boogie Nights. This thing was, I don't know, like Uncle Creepy's lair.
I've seen pictures. So
I mean, there was nothing. Think of who you're hearing this from. I mean, it's like, my grandfather created Buck Rogers. I had met, a kind of fan sort of before anybody knew they existed, because they'd always be in contact with my father and stuff like this. But I'd never seen anything like this. I didn't know this could exist. And, I knew guys who really wanted to talk about the old stuff, and it always just seemed kind of simultaneously cool and odd to me. Anyway, so what happened was the first time I encountered Forey Ackerman, I didn't actually encounter him, but Dad had wanted to do some research, and Ray Bradbury said, you got to talk to Forey Ackerman. He knows all this stuff. And so Dad writes Forey Ackerman a letter, and he says, "I now charge $125 an hour for consultation." I thought, that's weird. To talk about, like, old sci-fi serials, really? And then later on, Ray Bradbury said, "Look, that's my fault." And that is, a lot of people were taking advantage of Forey Ackerman. I said, "Well, you got to charge for it." And Forey got a little carried away about it. Because just the letter. Because these are like guys that we're not like totally socially skilled. Forey Ackerman, Bradbury is totally socially skilled, but Forey Ackerman, Bradbury, watch him on, I was watching him on Johnny Carson with Don Rickles.
Oh, wow.
That's a combination.
Sounds great.
Here's what was fascinating about it is, you got three geniuses sitting side by side on couches. They're talking about space program.
Ed McMahon, right?
What?
You're talking about Ed McMahon too? Is he the other genius?
Wasn't on there. I don't remember him from that night, but it was just,
I'm just kidding.
Johnny Carson. Google it, and you will see what this world has lost.
Oh.
All three of them were space geeks at this point. Don Rickles, was just in awe of the fact he was sitting next to Ray Bradbury, and was not what you think of Don Rickles as being like. He was actually a shockingly gentle and articulate guy, and very informed on space, which you wouldn't expect from Don Rickles. It's well worth seeing, but that's also gives you a sense of what it was like talking to Bradbury and how kind of fast and witty he really was. Sorry, this linear conversation.
No, it's okay. Now I'm worried. You're not going to charge us $125 to talk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm not.
No, it's gone up since then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm jacking up my Streamcast. Well,
so I sent the guys earlier today that you had mentioned that your first writing credit was the Further Adventures of the Puppy, or the Puppy's Further.
Timeless and unforgettable classic.
And that popped up in my YouTube feed, so I sent them a link to it. I was going to post it on your Facebook page, and then I was like, I'm sure someone has already posted this.
No, put it up there.
Okay, I'll do that after we finish today.
What's funny about the Puppy is the Puppy has totally been forgotten by, that was a semi-hit show that I think Ruby Spears had on for 2 or 3 seasons. And to be a network Saturday morning show in 1980, 82, 83, you're being watched by millions of people. But for some reason, it is almost forgotten.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware it was a show until you had talked about it.
That's what is really mysterious about this. There are, count them, 0 fans for the Puppy, 0, and yet it was a big hit show. Millions and millions of kids must have watched it, but they must have taken him out back and shot him after the show because.
Yeah, who are these?
I don't even remember the Wikipedia page. Or if it does, it's some of the what.
The voice talent on it is top notch. The guys that you ended up working with on Transformers, there's Peter Cullen and Michael Bell and John Stevenson.
Well, you saw that section in the book where I was talking about RoboForce, which is my first encounter with robots. Yeah. And you look at the voice talent in RoboForce, it was very much the voice talent we'd be working with later on in Transformers and G.I. Joe. This was the A-list talent. The one thing Sunbow had is, and I talk about it in the book, guys like Chris Latta. Okay, Joe Bacall meets him in some comedy, review in Greenwich Village and decides he's got the coolest voice in the world. And he became, to me, the voice that defined our properties. Simply because he was so different than anybody else.
He's very unique, yeah.
And the other thing that mattered was he was such a presence, horrifying presence. But I like the guy a lot. But he was a scary kind of guy. He had the pop his front teeth in and out, and have elaborate stories about how he lost his front teeth. And somebody was talking about how he was sweating all the time. I think that was Greg Berger. He was an incredibly edgy character, but he brought an energy to the room when he was there. Like by the time we were doing Inhumanoids, we were recording an ensemble. I talk about that in the book, just because you have all these great actors, but they never get to work off each other.
Right.
And so by then we had people that were willing to just come in and be there. But the thing is, we get it done fast, and we'd try to get their lines in isolation, but we'd have them stepping on each other. And it gave the show just more of its kind of frantic feel. It didn't feel like an old Hanna-Barbera show. But anyway, The voice. Yeah, there was a retinue of voice actors who would go through all of these shows who were extraordinarily talented.
Chris Latta, there's a great story about you bailing him out at 3 in the, getting a call at 3 in the morning, stuff like that.
And clear what either time was it clear what he was even in jail for, and like the police tell me it was always $150.
Yeah, he said jaywalking.
Yeah, right. It was jaywalking. I'm by that. And then what was funny about it was I remember at the time thinking, what is most of this guy's life be if iMovie's calling up? I mean, I was not exactly, the most together person in the universe at that moment. And, but I was probably the only person he knew who could actually show up with 12 and could and would at 3:00 in the morning at some police station in North Hollywood or in Hollywood.
You had a sport coat. You can look.
I had a sport coat. Sport coat did it. That was his summer. Everybody else will go nameless in the story. Like 5 times I was bailing people out of jail. I didn't even know that. They're just all these for.
So if we have legal problems, we know to come to you because you're like, I'm barely even friends with this person, but all right.
No, that was when that was in my young days where and I lived in the same house. I just bought this house I do now, where I always had people living on the floor because it's a pretty giant place for me to be living at, and so it was like this ongoing, just creative jam session. And that was part of the golden age. Is you're eating it, sleeping and drinking it, but you're like loving the people you're hanging around with, and they're the exact people you go out with and do stuff with. And there was a whole retinue of other people that kind of came along with it. And there were these mix and match D&D, Sunbow, rest of the world crowd people. It was really golden. I mean, that's why that's why I was writing it. Dave Marconi helped me a lot with it too because he was around for a lot of it.
That was definitely like a moment in history, I guess, in a way, because like now we're all trying to sort of live that again. Like,
no, we need to live that again. In a weird way, we're doing it right now. I mean, but if we got fluid enough with all the social media and Zoom and distance didn't matter, it's still not quite the same as actually standing around a 16-foot sand table and moving pieces around talking about, something.
Usually I can see Matt's entire head, not just from his nose up. Right. Oh, I think we lost him.
Well, you can almost put Clay and Matt
my knees
now and find a way and merge them into one person.
Yeah, let's do that.
No,
it's definitely one thing, during COVID and quarantine, I'm trying to just sort of like recapture some joy, and I'll watch some old Transformers episodes, just to get some, that element of fun that I used to have as a kid, I'm
trying to live my life as though it's 1986 right now.
I call it going 1985, but 1986 is probably a better term for it. And that is when I just decide, like, I don't even know where my cell phone is right now. It's somewhere upstairs. And yes, we're sitting on, I'm sitting on a Mac talking on a Zoom meeting, but there's something to not being notified and not being bothered and not, I'm liking paper books again. I don't get like messages and notifications in the middle of my paper book, and I don't have to click something away to keep reading it. I don't accidentally turn a page. I mean, there's like, incredible advantages to that stuff. And I've done some of the best writing of my life in this period, just because I can, and I've done my best to stay in contact with people and whenever possible, see them, and from 20 feet away in the backyard somewhere. Well, I dropped off a bunch of stuff from the basement with Caldini the other day, and he was standing there. Literally, I'm like, on the other side of his car in the driveway, and he's like, over there, and it's like, hey, good to see you. Like at least half of you.
Good to see you way over there, but I mean, you got to do something to get by, to get through this. So. I'm just using it. I mean, cleaning out the basement. That started this whole chain reaction. Well, I mean, the book just started a chain reaction, then the basement, and I'm doing a new project now for Deviation Games. Who are the guys that the two company heads are the guys that did all the Call of Duty, Black Ops games, and Zombies and all that. So it's really cool. I can't talk about the project, but it's like cool to be doing right down the center of the video game business again.
What are you doing? Or a AAA title for the Sony PlayStation? That's about as good as it gets.
Nice.
Yeah, and don't worry, you can talk about that stuff because no one listens to our podcast anymore.
I sign my NDAs. I can't.
You don't want to get in trouble. We can't bail you out, so don't.
I think it's interesting. You talk a little bit about it in the book and some other interviews that like you're not really an engineer, but you have a lot of computer jobs and technology, like doing the first interactive game with like a RCA laser disc and stuff like that. So it's just great to hear like how there's a whole creative side of the video game industry that's not just writing code and
Oh no! I mean, because I don't write code. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a coder. I'm not anything like that. I just literally design the games and the fiction, that go on top of the games. But yeah, that was in '83. That we're out there. John Phillips gets to deal with them, and and he says, "Hey, you want to go do this?" And the next thing I know, we're sitting in a bar in Greenwich, Connecticut, with identical twins who were that year the most expensive models in Manhattan, but happened to be Phillips's girlfriend and her sister. And we're sitting there shooting a thing called Lounge Lizard, and it's actually shockingly good. I rewatched it on YouTube, but people get mad at me. But yeah, it was really, that's been one of the just magical things about this period. I mean, there are good things about the COVID period. I mean, any other moment I'd be bitterly complaining about it, but I mean, there actually have been good things about it.
And you
got to find the good in all this bad somehow.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There's not a good option around that, Yeah. Hey, let's really be miserable for a year.
Well, it is interesting, really. Your career has spanned, when you talk about the technology, you talk about working on like your old, computers and your old, like, and now here you are, you worked on Pokemon as well.
Yeah, I had told them that I had read a tweet recently that was Pokemon Go was the closest thing to world peace we've achieved.
Well, that was the Gamesmaster started while I was sitting in my friend's apartment in Paris. My family let my family stay there, and Pokemon was coming out. I think the next day, and I was like, if this fails, I don't know what happens to our company, and it didn't fail.
No,
but, no, it did really well. And that was a fun period. Doing the Geo games was a fun period of my life. I mean, that's if I live long enough, I'll write a book about that too.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, there's definitely a market for another book.
Pokemon Go. Her and her friends are so crazy for it. Like they still, even in COVID times, when she's driving, she's like trying to look at the phone. It's like, you want me to do that?
And that's, I mean, I think, that that's one of the few safe kinds of things you can do because you're 900 feet. I mean, I pretty much consider it as you're not going to get COVID, outside during the day unless somebody sneezes down your throat, It's not
I still see plenty of people out in the neighborhood on their walks and their quests and in certain spots where I always see them in my neighborhood where I think there's a gym nearby.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it's been a long career, and what's funny is you try to just stay constantly doing what's happening right now, you know what I mean, or what's going to be happening next. It's always been the idea.
I mean, it's pretty cool though. I mean, it's really interesting. There's a couple things though too. If we want to go back, even though it's good to we're talking about current, but I want to go back to some of the Transformers in the '80s stuff because there was one of my. It's a fun story. I think it's a funny story about Casey Kasem, and maybe we're a little, I know it's a little socially.
Matt, I only pointed out Carbomia to Matt about 2 years ago. He got the joke.
I didn't get it.
In the book, I say anything bad about it. Okay, one of my rules I wrote the book is I can't say anything. The truth is, I couldn't really remember anything bad. You know what I mean? I mean, as I said, I remember that period so fondly. But what an anus that guy was.
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't get the car bomb joke, but of course, back then it was definitely a sensitive, subject.
Back then, it wasn't considered sensitive to think it was a bad thing that people were blowing people up in cars.
I guess, you're right.
That was considered just a bad, antisocial behavior at that
there was a lot of there was like Dr. Demento and like songs about Muammar Gaddafi and stuff that I remember at the time, and those were always like the most popular songs on Dr. Demento.
Well, the guy murdered 300 people in Lockerbie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should say.
He killed a bunch of guys in Germany, and we pretty much we shot down 2 of his planes in the Gulf of Sidra. I mean, it was not like anybody thought, what a great guy that Muammar Gaddafi.
How dare you? How dare you make fun of him on Transformers?
But Casey Kasem's problem was, and if I'm going to for 2 seconds pretend to be sensitive about this, I will. And that is what his problem was that. I mean, Abdul Fakadi. It's basically an anagram for Gaddafi.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand when I wrote that is that Abdul is an Arab name and Gaddafi is, a Libyan name. That's a totally different thing. Okay. And he was upset about what was demonizing Arabs. And my attitude was, I'm talking about Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, you're really going to defend him? I mean, we can defend
really splitting hairs at this point,
demonizing himself. Let's face it. Come on. Yeah.
Well, he was the first person I ran into, and little did I know this was going to become the world I lived in, where you kind of go out of your way to get offended so you get publicity. It was kind of how I felt about it.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
That was a precursor of what was coming. But the other thing that was kind of a butt about the guy was, I remember totally before that, when that was happening, I remember talking to him out in the green room. And because he did America's Top 40, right? And he did America's Top 40. All my life, it felt like I was listening to Casey Kasem. Like me in high school, washing the car, and there's Casey Kasem on America's Top 40. I miss public music. We got to bring that back too. The whole idea that people show up with their boom box and you're listening to whatever somebody across the street's listening to, and they're kind of just fine with you. But anyway. And I was asking about it. He said, I never really like that stuff or rock and roll. I said, you do America's Top 40 and you're telling me you don't like that stuff?
You did that for years. You must have really been suffering.
I know, right? Because think about how many things happened in the 40, 50 years we did that. You don't like music? Okay, that's weird.
But it's funny the way you describe it, because you say you don't ever remember turning it on, but it was always on. And I was like, yeah, I think I remember watching it, but I don't remember sitting down going, oh, I got to watch Casey Kasem now.
That's part of what we've lost about the world. I mean, some rather prominent Transformer characters are boom boxes, right? Mm-hmm. And what that was a time when, even when I was in college, everybody had in my frat would have their stereo on at the same time, and you'd walk down the hallway and, oh, here's a Grateful Dead. Oh, here's Deep Purple. Oh, here's just Derek and the Dominoes.
My wife gets amazed at how many songs I know from between the 70s and early 2000s. Stuff I would never have listened to on my own, but you had like stoner friends in high school that would be listening to certain stuff, and then metalhead. It's stuff that unless I'm going out to sing karaoke, I never get exposed to anything in terms of music.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I never get exposed to modern mainly because everybody's listening to it on earbuds. Second of all, because other than like movie and TV soundtracks, I mean, the algorithms aren't particularly good. Spotify does not recommend a lot of great music to me.
No. Yeah.
It either tries to give me more of what I already listened to, which isn't exactly expanding me, or I'll check out Made Just for You, and then I'll hear some the Vomitrons at 3,000 decibels, and it's like who thought exactly what part of the DNA of that algorithm said this guy's really going to want to hear the Vomitrons this morning.
All right, so really quick, because you mentioned soundtracks, we got to talk about the Transformers, the movie soundtrack, for a quick second, because that part of the book is also really fun.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Talk about capturing the time.
Yep.
So interesting.
Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, I was just saw on Facebook that Vince Nicola had COVID, so let's all send out good thoughts for Vince.
Oh no!
The soundtrack was one of the. To me, I remember just going to see it. Because I've probably seen it 5 times since it came out. Yeah, I saw it once. When we were doing the 20th anniversary disc. I watched it the night before we did this. Audio, just Sue Blue and Nelson Chin and I did the audio soundtrack for it. where you talk on the DVD.
Yeah, the commentary track. Yeah.
And so we did that. But the night before we did that, I watched it. Then I watched it again when we did that. Then another time they had a party at the Cinegrill, which was basically this bar in Hollywood. So you're you're in kind of a nightclubby bar kind of a setting. It's not a theater setting. And what struck me that time I saw it was just how 80s it was. Because there were actually people walking around doing stuff, and it felt like, if you want to know what the 80s sounded like, it's this Transformers soundtrack.
Yeah.
You put together a million other, soundtracks, but that's really it.
That sounds like the ultimate place to see the movie, in more like a club bar type of setting.
Oh, it was absolutely perfect place to see it. Then I saw it at the Egyptian Theater one time after that. Then I saw it at a con where they'd screened it. Here's what told me the movie had a fan base, and there's like 500 people in the room, and I'm supposed to be talking while I'm doing it. While they're doing it, they're asking me questions while we're screening the movie. It's kind of like an interactive CD, DVD soundtrack.
Yeah.
And at one point, the real soundtrack broke, and so just the picture was running. The speakers went out. And I couldn't talk, and the pictures were running, and the entire audience knew all of the lines. It was like this, like being in Transformer church or something. It was
These guys would do that.
That would have been. If we were there, we would have been just reciting the lines along with them.
And also, in kind of along the lines of the soundtrack, have you heard of the band the Cybertronic Spree, where it's a bunch of people that dress up as Transformers? It's like,
I have seen videos of that. Yes.
Yeah, and they are Clay booked them for a show in Massachusetts here, but due to COVID,
it's going to happen next year. It's still happening.
But it was just the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. Like, I was watching, I was like, this is just incredible. Soundwave dancing and Rumble playing the drums. And Rumble follows me on Instagram, so that made my day right there.
You never thought you'd hear it say that. Rumble's
there is some kind of a mix. I got a taste of it twice, both with Joe Troutman, where he did a thing called NerdCon, where it was basically a con that they held at an art museum in Corona, California. And it was the most elegant con I'd ever been to, but he had bands playing, and it wasn't just 6,000 decibel bands. It was like these guys doing just doing really fun stuff. And I was hearing acoustic versions of the Transformer theme, things like that. And then when on the day we announced the Unicron Kickstarter at Comic-Con last year, we did a party that night. They had like metal bands in there, and then Vince DiCola played, and Stan Bush did not come down for that, but Vince DiCola played, and it was great. Because that was the other thing. Vince DiCola has this prog rock feel, which was very much, if you get to the heart of what everybody that I knew at that point was listening to, that was it.
Yeah, he's got like odd time signatures and stuff like that. He's really.
Oh yeah, probably the pinnacle of it. Transformers soundtrack's pretty close, but you listen to stuff like Yes or Asia or Anderson, Wakeman, Bruford and Howe, or the parts of Genesis. It's that kind of stuff. And when we think about it, the other thing about the mid 80s, this is actually on topic because it's exactly at the same time we were doing this stuff, was probably the most prominent musical influences was a show called Miami Vice. Remember Miami Vice?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you think about it, the real voices of that, they had Glenn Frey and Don Henley showed up and all that, but the real voices of that were Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Remember In the Air Tonight?
Yeah. Everyone air drums to that song. So.
Yeah, okay. Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel were in the most avant-garde prog rock band in the world, which was the first iteration of Genesis in the 70s. And that turned
flower heads and stuff.
The crazy stuff. Listen to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and that, or Selling England by the Pound. That was as far out as you can get and still be listenable music. They turn into mainstream by the 80s, and that entire that drum beat that you associate with the 80s was literally Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Their sound engineer made a mistake and he left the gate open on it, so the drum beat basically went backwards. Mm-hmm. They said this is what drums have to sound like, and that's you've heard it sampled in every song you've ever heard. and it was all now. it helps that Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel sitting in the room hearing the mistake that the sound engineer made to go, oh, wait a second, that's not a bug, that's a feature. Yeah.
Wow, so you know music too. You're really.
Oh yes, yeah.
We started off with football, music. I mean, we've recovered everything here. We don't want to keep it too long.
There we are, and we kept it mostly on topic.
I would think so.
About 80s music. Anyway, all right. So back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
No. It's fine if you want to keep going.
My favorite part of each Flint Dille interview is where you say, "Let me know if this is getting boring, and I'll shut up."
And I'm sure,
but all of it is fascinating.
It is. It's all very fascinating. I mean, yeah. I think you.
There are things we haven't even touched upon. We haven't really touched upon working at Sunbow. We haven't talked really, other than the puppy. We haven't talked about Ruby Spears. There's so much to cover, but we don't want to keep you here all day. I mean, we could listen to you.
Sure. I know the Chargers and Patriots game is starting pretty soon, so I don't want to, keep
all right. So let's give ourselves 10 more minutes. Not starting till 1. Well, whatever the 1 o'clock is your time.
Right. Yeah, Matt couldn't figure that out either.
Yeah, I'm really bad with time zones, and I lived in LA for a little while.
We'll go 10 more minutes. I mean, I can come back. It's not like I cease to exist.
That'd be great. We'd love to have you back anytime. But I mean, I guess
I want to talk about your droid experience, because I remember seeing an interview with you, like on one of the Transformers DVDs, and you were like, I had a disastrous droid experience, and I didn't know what it was until I listened to the book, and I was like, oh man, because we've all had that job where you think things are going right, and then the bottom falls out of it, and you're like, what happened?
Okay.
You get to meet George Lucas and everything. I mean, that's.
Oh, okay. Imagine, I think I pretty much say this in the book, but I mean, imagine, you're writing The Puppy in the Badlands, and you're doing Mr. T. And, things are going really well writing animation, but you get a job working for George Lucas. And it's not just, this is right after Return of the Jedi come out. I literally started working the weekend that, actually right before that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out. Okay, George Lucas had never made a mistake until that point. And I remember seeing Temple of Doom and thinking, ooh, George and Steve and I are having their best day. Now, looking back, that's a better movie than I thought it was at the time, but nothing could have been as good as what I was hoping for, right? I mean, that Raiders Lost Ark is still one of my all-time favorite films.
Same.
Absolutely.
It's on the A list with a bullet. So anyway, so you're showing up at Lucasfilm, and you drive up, that literally his producer, Mickey Herman, was a very nice woman who she did sound checks for their stuff, but she got to produce the Saturday morning cartoon. And I'm doing a Star Wars Saturday, and I get to write Star Wars characters, wow. And I get, we drive up to the ranch. Lucas has a ranch up in somewhere long way away from San Francisco, probably an hour north of that's my recollection of it. May only be 40 minutes, but I mean, it's tough. And you go down the secret road, and then you come up this thing. It was my first experience really with dealing with, kind of a security environment. And, I was at the apex of Hollywood at that moment, just walking in there and just, wow, look at this, and I mean, I sort of knew what to expect with him, because I had classes from John Milius and I knew Randy Kleiser and the other people in his screenwriting class. So I knew kind of what that vintage of USC, because I went to SC Film School, probably a decade after he did, but no, about that. So I knew the vibe, and I knew the feel of what it was going to be, but still, I mean, there was Paul Dini and Art Kober, and and we go up there, and we're in Oz. I mean, that's the best way you can describe it, is we're in Oz, and even being led to his office, you go down this mysterious set of things. You're going indoors and outdoors, and and finally you end up in a room, and there's the real George Lucas sitting there. And remember, this is he was like really George Lucas then, I mean, he looked exactly like he was supposed to look and be George Lucas. And, well, because like, rock bands, you know what I mean? It's like, like Keith Richard of Gimme Shelter is very different than Keith Richard now. I mean, he's endlessly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, so I mean, at the apex of everything, you got the shot in the world. You think, everything's going to be clear sailing for the entire rest of your life and you'll never have a problem again. And then it doesn't work out that way. I mean, we just could not get the Bible for droids approved. And Mickey finally said, look, this just isn't working. And so it's like, I come back to LA and it's like, you have to, I thought I'd have to explain to everybody what happened. I thought my career was over. I thought, oh man, my big shot, and I failed, and that's like a down moment. I mean, it was a roller coaster ride. It was a very fast ride because I was probably only there for 6 months.
But it seems like it probably worked out for the best. Droids wasn't a great show, and things seem to have worked out pretty well for you.
I watched Mandalorian.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, I found the Bible for that show, and it's not that far from Mandalorian. That was the other really weird thing about it is, I mean, it's not Mandalorian, but I mean, it was one of those few things where we were totally off the beaten track of the regular Star Wars mythology, and we were telling stories about the droids before they met Luke Skywalker. And so you invented your own hero and you had your own adventures and you're living in this kind of a world. We couldn't use any of the characters except the droids. And I remember Paul Dini, who was kind of quicker on the uptake than I was, wanted to use Boba Fett. And I remember George Lucas saying, "Yeah, he's our best-selling action figure," but not really understanding why, And Boba Fett of the first 3 movies really is the model for the Mandalorian.
Right.
Yeah. He's this masked guy who can go on a bunch of adventures that have nothing to do with the main circuit cable of the story. It's a fun story. But yeah, and then later on, Paul told me, and I asked him recently, I said, did he really say that, or were you just trying to make me feel good? And he said, no, he really said that. Lucas had said, whatever, that guy that had all the good ideas. And and then Lucas,
so who was stopping all the good ideas in the end? Do you have any idea? Was it
I think it was, there's not a villain in the story. I think that
was it a mix up in communications or something?
Yeah, I think it would come under the general heading mix up in communications, and just a producer who had never really done that before and didn't really know how to understand notes. And just thought they were binary as opposed to,
I have editors like that. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it just happens. I mean, it was a real lesson, and you're right. It didn't work out that well for the show. And maybe I learned something about robots that helped me out with Transformers later on. But yeah, when I walked away from that, I'm never doing robots again. I'm done with the robots. A year later, I'm sitting there with Optimus. And then George Lucas recommended me to Steven 3 years later, and that's when I go.
So there you go.
They called them to get a recommendation, and he gave it apparently. So
wow, that's something.
It's one of those, but that's one of those life lesson stories where you have this horrible disaster and you think it's over, and it's actually the best thing that ever happened to you.
Right.
Okay. On one hand, and then on another hand, things have a funny habit of atoning and fixing themselves later on. That's why I realized that, the Joseph Campbell thing, because it was relevant to the book, because George Lucas actually handed me a copy of Hero of a Thousand Faces in the meeting. Nice. And that, that's a good theme for this book, because it really was this story of a writer's journey.
Well, there's a lot of parts of the book, I think, like Clay said at the beginning, that it's not just like, oh, this is fun stuff that happened, but like there's some great sort of inspirational stories, and like you said, like it's a good lesson there, like how things can seem like this was my shot and I blew it and it's over, but everything worked out, and
it just does. You just have to keep going. You know what I mean? Because it's not like it ever stops happening. You have horrible things happen to you. And it's all how you deal with them, and it's all how you use COVID, This basically sucks being locked in your house for a year. Okay, that looks a lot like house arrest to me. But yet we're somehow getting through it.
I've been working at home for the last 10 years, and I had so many people contacting me going, okay, how do you do this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, no, it's absolutely true. And then the truth is, on a day-to-day level, this is pretty much how my life always has been. I'm basically a writer who works at home. However, that would be punctuated by going to meetings, going to lunches, and going out and doing stuff.
As I said, the biggest difference was now I can't go to the gym, and it's like more of a production to go to the grocery store.
Yeah, I got really lucky with the gym. I probably lifted more weight in this period than because I got a trainer who works in a park in Barrington, in Brentwood, and so I lift weights 3 times a week, and do it with enthusiasm. I've never done it before because it's like the only time I get to go outside and do that kind of stuff. That's great.
All right, there's one more thing I wanna get to before we let you go, but there's a part of the book, and I guess it didn't really dawn on me, but you were talking about the potential for crossovers between the properties you're working on, and Hector Ramirez.
I wanted to talk about that too. Yeah, thank you for saying so.
I don't even know how. I don't know if I remembered that from the 80s. I don't think so, but I mean, I thought that, I was like, oh my God, Hector Ramirez was the only guy who, of course, was Geraldo Rivera and everything. I mean, obviously, I didn't get that as a kid, but a
journalist. I mean, what it was a journalist, and that says a lot about what media was like then. Because remember, cable TV was new, and we were a product of it. We were syndicated TV, and a lot of that showed on cable or on off-brand, network. We weren't a network show, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And Geraldo Rivera was the same thing. He had this big debacle where they hyped the hell out of he's opening up this Al Capone's vault, we thought they were going to find, the lost treasures of the Inca in there or something, but what they found was a beer bottle was rolling out. It was a big embarrassment, and should have been a career-ending injury for Geraldo Rivera, and you can still see him to this day on Fox.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
See, he's another one that took a bad experience.
Yeah,
overcame it.
But the one thing, and there's your lesson for television, is the one thing that crosses over, is stuff like a service person. I mean, Hector, a reporter can be in all of our shows because we thought of them as all one shared world. And so Hector Ramirez can be in G.I. Joe, he can be in Inhumanoids, he can be in Jam, he can be in Transformers. He was in all those shows.
It's pretty amazing. There was that one episode that Cobra Commander was in that one where they.
Because remember, the exact same people are doing these shows at the exact same time, and it all blurs together. Marissa Fairborn being, Flint and Lady J's daughter being in Transformers, right?
Right. I mean, I guess I didn't put that together either, but yeah, that's so it but there was never a major crossover, and I don't know, I feel like now
they didn't want to do that. That's not the way franchises worked back then. And the idea of crossovers, I mean, here's the thing, is that other than doing a Green Hornet and Batman crossover on the Batman TV show in 66, 67, whatever year that was, and in comic books, there weren't such thing as crossovers. Every once in a while, there would do something. I mean, maybe I don't know. Mary Tyler Moore shows, Lou Grant would show up, or Mary Tyler Moore would show up in a Lou Grant episode, or something weird like that. But that wasn't the way people thought, only in comics. But it happened. We were all thinking that way at that moment, and we were thinking in different ways because the comics guys showed up. That's why we thought, our shows all had some sense of continuity. By the time you get to Inhumanoids and Visionaries, there were continuity. They were very modern TV, like streaming shows right now. I mean, you can run them now. The plots all led to the other, and there are references back to things. We tried to keep them self-contained. But they were very modern, and that wasn't really something I grabbed onto it and loved it. But that was really something the comic book guys brought. What I brought, being the only game guy in the business, is this stuff has to make sense. Yeah, I mean, let's just think about this with world building is probably the way you describe it as.
Right. Well, I think you were ahead of the times, really, because now,
cinematic universes are all the rage now. They'd probably be encouraging that these days.
Yeah. But,
and we, to what extent we did do that. They weren't nearly as. You look at the first season of Transformers; it's very episodic. You go to third season, and it's very continuity.
Well, I mean, it was every little thing we could have to talk about on the playground was cool with me. It's like, oh, Gage, did you see that? So, but yeah, now I think you were ahead of your time, and I don't know what else to say. But I think we can probably close on that. But thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Let's do one final plug. We do haven't even plugged the title of the book is The Gamesmaster, My Life in the 80s Geek Culture Trenches with G.I. Joe, Dungeons and Dragons, and the Transformers. And of course, there you go. And check out your auctions, right? I mean, how do we?
Yeah, I believe they're okay. My friend John Platten, who I did a lot of games with and still do stuff with, is an eBay expert. And so when I decided,
one of those too.
I'm not an expert, but okay.
Yeah. So I mean, he decided he would sell all the stuff. His name is Hannah Vachel, HANAVACHEL, on eBay. But they're gonna post them on our Facebook page. He always posts on the Facebook page because people are getting mad at me. It's like, I mean, originally, people want to make deals and buy stuff, and I realized the only fair way to do this is just put it out there. So that it I believe is going up around now. It might already be up. I'll check my Facebook page and see right now. we will find out. Of course, by the time you run this, it'll be really old news. But
I'll try to get this out as soon as possible
this week.
Yeah, I'll get it out.
Great. Well, and when you do, post it on my page. Now I'm not seeing auctions up here, so they're not up yet.
Okay, good. So we haven't missed it.
Watch for these auctions.
All right.
That's what we'll do. I'll try to find it.
Playing in the basement in that part of the show we never finished talking about. But I'll come back if you want to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Anytime we would love to have you on. We love the stories, and it's
we've extended an invite out to Buzz Dixon as well. So and he accepted. So is there anything that we should ask him or avoid before
Talk to Doug Booth. He's also on my Facebook page. Knows this stuff. Ron Friedman's there. Yeah, he's an entertaining thing. He makes me look like sedate. Ron, Michael Charles Hill. He'll sometimes come. He sometimes won't. And and Marv is on there. So you get those guys. You got everybody.
That's great.
I mean, Marv morphed into one of the best game writers in the world. I mean, it's what an extraordinarily talented guy he is. I mean, all these guys. And Paul Dean, you want to talk about Lucasfilm stuff, he can tell you he didn't get fired. He didn't have anything brutal happen. And he's playing Transformers and Joes and Gems and Lord knows what else in that period. So, this guy got to get out.
I like how all these people, including yourself, Eric, are continuing to put out really great product. Like I love Mars Comics and Paul's too, and all the stuff you guys are working. And my girlfriend, she's a gamer, so she's played like half of your video games for sure.
Well, you want to keep going, right? I'd be kind of. Yeah, what'd you do after 80? After you got done with Visionaries? Well, let's see. I was selling vacuum cleaners in Bolivia for a while.
Yeah, you want to, as long as the creative juices are still there, you gotta.
Oh, you gotta keep going. No, as I said, I think I've done the best stuff I've probably ever done just in this COVID period because not much stopping me.
There you go. There you go. Well, thanks so much, Flint. We'll let you go watch some football.
All right.
Coming on, we're gonna put a link to the Gamesmaster on our page,
and I'll link to the puppy on your page.
Yeah, right. And links to the puppy and links to this on my page.
Yes, we will. We'll send you the link. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
See you later.
See you later.